Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now it's been a while since I made a suggestion or an idea video for the developers, but with the latest announcement where they said that they were going to be releasing updates in the upcoming year, I got to thinking what could these updates possibly be, what would be really cool to see in the game, and all that good stuff. So I have a bunch of ideas coming for you, but the first one I'm going to start off with is building on something we already have, and that is the oil industry. I'd like to think I have some insight due to the fact I've been working in the industry for over 10 years now. So with all that, I've been playing a lot and building a lot of creations for the oil industry. Now my first pride and joy is OMA, which is my underwater exploration industry, but Alta has been seeing a lot of love, and that is by no mistake. I actually find myself very intrigued by the fact that I can almost play a video game that has a very similar nature to what I do in real life. Granted, I do more of the engineering and design work for the facilities, but just being in the industry is something that is really cool and gives me an insight, having been to mine sites, been to oil fields, all that good stuff. So with that, I present to you this idea. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to call this idea the Oil Survey and Exploration Update. So this is an update that I think the developers can make maybe relatively easy, because a lot of the ideas are pre-existing in the game, but there are also some changes, including technical changes, that I'd like to see that would also facilitate this update and make it that much more cooler. But before I begin explaining each one of these vehicles and their purpose and how this update would work, I want to talk about what we currently have. So currently in the game we have these oil platforms or oil deposits where we can go and build a creation on top of it. There is a pre-existing wellhead in here, and we build a really cool creation above. Take for example something like this. So this is an oil rig that I built, or a land-based oil rig that has the full shebang, including a distillation procedure, but it has the drill and it attaches the rods to the wellhead and you end up with oil. So really cool that we have this type of facility or this type of location in the game where we can build a really cool creation, albeit a land-based and stationary creation. And then we have this really cool location intended for building an oil platform. So again, really cool. You get to build a stationary platform. This is a huge space that lets you put all sorts of things into your platform. So I love this. The last thing I've never personally seen or done, but what I read is that you can build a ship that has the oil drilling procedure on it, and then there could be deposits randomly in the sea somewhere that you have to then bring your ship, attach a wellhead to the ground, all that really cool stuff. So it makes it a little bit more mobile in a sense that we're no longer sort of using a pre-built workshop or workbench and putting our creation on it. So it does add a little bit of mobile or mechanical elements to the existing idea. That last aspect I mentioned is what ultimately led me to my idea here, which is pretty much developing and working on that idea where you have to create a mechanical creation that's going to drill oil. So obviously the stationary locations are super cool, but I would like to see the use and development of creations that actually have to be mechanical, whether it be rail-based or vehicle-based or ship-based. So this kind of builds on that. Because I've never drilled oil with a ship, I don't know exactly how it works, but this is my interpretation of it. So I assume that on our map there'd be a location marked off where there is an oil deposit, and then we can go and drill. Or maybe just anywhere in the ocean we can start drilling and we're going to get oil, but this sort of takes one step back prior to all this, and it's the actual surveying and exploration that's going to lead us to finding a viable oil deposit that we can then drill. So with that in mind, finally my idea that I'm going to present to you, it relies on ground penetrating radar, test drilling, all that stuff to find on your map where you have oil. So this truck, for example, will be my starting point, and I'm going to pretty much explain the procedure of what I expect you to do in this game, or this update. So first step you do is you drive out to various locations on the map and survey for where there could be oil. Now, whether the oil is always in the same locations and people can talk about it on Reddit, or whether it moves around based on your individual game, that doesn't really matter. But I imagine it would move around just like the location of the bases and stuff. So let's just say, for argument's sake, you're driving around and then you want to search this area if there's oil. So you have technology that's intended for that. So you hop out, and in the back of your truck you've built something that you can actually use, that you would be able to take core samples of the land and then analyze them to determine where the oil is. So the way I could see core samples working, for example, is there'd be a machine that you drag around with you in the back of your truck or whatever, and you stick in the ground, and it would pretty much just core samples, and whether on a display would tell you if there's oil or not, because obviously you can't be researching and looking at a little display, or you can't be looking at core samples in the game, I presume. But what you'd be able to do is use the data from that machine. Like, you'd probably just stick a machine on the ground, and then a computer would tell you whether there's oil or not. The other one I can see, which is less conventional in a sense of they don't really commonly use this for oil exploration so much, but there's been research done on the topic, and because Stormworks is set in kind of like a little bit of a futuristic time era when you can use kind of simplified or easier type of solutions than what exists currently in real life, and that would be the use of ground penetrating radar elements that can tell you what is buried under the ground. So maybe you'd have the ground penetrating radar as part of your vehicle, and then you just drive around and pretty much search on a display as you're driving, or you can build a ground penetrating radar ROV that pretty much uses remote technology, and this would be the element that the developers would have to add. Currently we don't have ground penetrating radar, but I just used this map as an example. But let's just say you pretty much either use an ROV or remote operated vehicle, or you use a vehicle like this that's powered and you kind of drive it around, and on this display you will end up with the details or information of your ground penetrating radar. So here's a screenshot of what that would look like, and really all you get is a sort of an underground survey of what is there. And I'm sure the developers would make it fairly obvious when it's oil. It would pretty much be plain, otherwise there's oil, and maybe it would tell you the depth at which your oil is. So then if it's like way too deep, then it's not even viable for you to drill for it. But if it's not too deep, then that'd be the place where you want to start to explore or dig in. And by dig in, I mean literally. So what I envision is you'd build a pilot rig or drilling rig on one of your vehicles that you'd actually be able to start to drill a hole. So currently, actually, the reason why I show this demonstration, not only for the fact that it looks cool and looks like one of those drilling rigs, but if we take a look here, this is our current wellhead. So this is by no means mobile. You can never have it in the back of a truck like that. You pretty much always have to have it in a massive creation, which we're going to get to later, because this update would still use this massive wellhead. But what I'd like to see in the game first is a smaller wellhead, and also smaller pipes, because currently our oil rods are fairly long. You can see in the back of this trailer here. I'd like to see ones that are about half the length, so half rods, and I don't know what they'd be called, but the reason for that is because they would just be that much more mobile in your oil drilling rig, or whether it be a trailer or truck mounted rig. But this would be pretty much to determine and give us a pilot hole that we could then use, and you could even leave it and just do that, or you can then build a bigger creation that's mobile and that comes here, which we'll get to in a second. So let's say you bring this over, and for now I just put the nuclear control rods because it kind of looks like what I wanted to show, but this would now drill into the ground here, and we'd end up with oil. Like, this whole truck, probably a bit bigger than this, but it would have a pump jack, it would have everything built in miniature form. So not like these massive ones that we currently have, but miniature form, and for that reason, very small flow rate. So what I imagine for that wellhead, whatever the capacity or volume that this produces of oil or drills out of oil, this would be like 1/10 or even smaller. So it's not really economical, let's say, as close, like, so that one definitely has a clear advantage, but this one has a portability advantage. So you could develop 10 of these things, for example, and drill out as much oil as that big one, or you build a big creation. But let's say now, like we're talking about the second part, you've used your ground penetrating radar, you've used one of these things. Even what we could have is a handheld ground penetrating radar in the form of an inventory that you could just walk around and scan, but I'd prefer to not. Like, I'd prefer one of these. So you come here, you put this into the ground, you're drilling, you hit oil. Great. So then you could use a tanker, you can directly go and start selling this, or you can then have the logistical problem or logistical nightmare or logistical planning aspect. I think that's the right word. So you'd have to use logistics to then bring something larger if you don't want to just use this. So depending on how much oil you have, because presumably this thing would tell you how big your oil reserve is. So if it's a massive, massive reserve, you're never going to pump it out with this little thing. So in that case, you then build something that is either rail based, so you could use it on you could put it on a rail and bring it over here and then install it, or truck it over like this and kind of commission it together, like put it together, whether they'd be massive pieces or whether the whole thing's on crawler tracks and it comes over here and starts to drill for oil. Now, because our pipes are half the size or quarter size, so they're much smaller, what I would also like to see is a pipe welder, sort of like the one I'm holding here, but this is a welding torch. I'd like to see a pipe welder that can use just this to join pipes together, so you don't have to have that huge clamp system. So you could almost make a little handheld workshop next to your thing here. So you pretty much drag out your small rod, and again, it'd be half the size of this. Then you drag out your other one. And the reason this is actually very interesting is because pipe welding is huge in real life. I mean, there's careers based out of that. So presumably you wouldn't have them rolling around on the ground, but you'd have some sort of preliminary clamp system or a table, for example, where you come and weld them, and as soon as you put these together, or in like 5 seconds, they join together, and then you'd use a forklift like this, or this truck would have a system built in that can then lift it up, put it into here and into the ground. So obviously if you end up with, like, if this thing tells you that the oil is like 100 meters down, then you don't want to start drilling here. But if it tells you it's like 20 or 30, then that's a good place to start. So then you use these tools to sort of build on what you have in the ground, and not only have just land-based oil reserves, but have ones that you can then do all the logistics, the calculation, the transportation, bring everything out and search for that oil and then drill for it. This update does not stop on land. So actually what I would envision this update would have is the ability to survey underwater as well. And like I said, I don't know if the current system has it marked off on the map where the oil deposits are, or whether they are everywhere and you just have to put a drill head on the bottom of the sea. But my idea would actually have you creating ships for oil exploration, mini subs for oil exploration, and they'd get to be much more compact than what we currently have, because of course, like I showed you, the wellhead is massive. But it would be very nice to use a sub, for example, this size, and have ground penetrating radar on it. So you take it down, you check the seabed, see where the oil is, and then you have a slightly bigger submarine that you then come, you install some pipes. Maybe that submarine has a pump jack built in, like how my truck rig was, and you start to pump out the oil. And then whether you just leave the whole thing sub-based and take it with the submarine in a tank, or whether then you develop a ship like this that has mini sub capabilities, that lays pipes, that creates the wellheads, and kind of does the full shebang, not just the game telling you where it is, and not just you having stationary bases and platforms to build the oil. So here it's much more immersive, much more mechanical. I could see a lot of different types of creations being built. We have most of the elements in the game already for this type of thing. The only thing we really don't have is that ground penetrating radar function. More or less everything else we already have, and it would really add an extra element and reason for all kinds of oil exploration and oil companies, because currently we have transportation of oil, drilling of oil in stationary locations, but this would also be the logistics, the surveying, the exploration, all that other stuff. A lot of cool engineering topics for all the fans of Stormworks that are also either engineers or aspiring engineers, and it just uses that much more of the existing game infrastructure to add really cool parts of the game where you can pretty much utilize your creativity to solve all kinds of really cool oil drilling problems. So that is the idea that I would love to see with the updates that the developers are talking about next year. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more content, more creations, and as always, happy Stormworksing, everyone.